Enemy force detected. Enemy battleship detected. Enemy cruiser sighted. Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy cruiser detected.
Enemy cruiser destroyed.
Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy cruiser sighted.
Torpedoes, dead ahead! port.
Teammate, I need your support.
Torpedoes direct front. Torpedoes dead ahead.
Enemy destroyer sighted. Enemy cruiser sighted.
Torpedoes dead ahead. Torpedoes to port.
begins in 5 minutes.